Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 252, titled A Restorative Practice for Days When Hope Feels Far Away. What if gratitude was never meant to replace grief, but to sit beside it? So often we are taught to choose between sorrow and appreciation, as if holding both at once is somehow too much for a single heart. But what if that tension is not a problem to solve, but a truth to learn how to live inside of? So today, we're going to explore how gratitude and sorrow can coexist and what it means to engage a restorative practice on days when hope feels far away. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I traveled to my hometown for a baby shower hosted by my mother and my grandmother. Before the celebrations began, we stopped to visit my grandfather, who was living in a memory care facility at the time. Memory care facilities can hold a particular kind of grief. Sometimes the losses feel visible before anyone says a word, but this facility felt very safe and good for us. The staff cared deeply for their residents, and it gave our family the gift of trusting that my grandfather was being well cared for when we couldn't be there for him ourselves. That day, he was having a clearer day. I can still picture him sitting there with his icy clear blue eyes, his warm smile, and the familiar gentleness that seemed untouched by the progression of his loss. Even as memory became less reliable, his kindness remained remarkably intact. I remember sitting beside him and sharing the news I had waited so many years to tell him. I said, "Papa, I'm pregnant." And he squeezed my hand and he smiled at me and he said, "Oh, honey, that is wonderful. But who are you again?" And for a moment, my stomach dropped out, and then he laughed right in my face and said, "Just kidding. I know exactly who you are. I'm so excited. This is wonderful." And honestly, it was exactly the kind of joke he would have made years earlier before dementia or memory loss became a part of our family's story. And I have a photograph from that visit that I still treasure of him and I, one of him and my grandmother holding hands. Sometimes I look at them and see the joy of finally sharing that news with him. Sometimes I look at them and see the grief that was already in the room. And even then, I knew there was a possibility that my daughter would never know this amazing man who helped raise me. And sure enough, not long after, he passed. Looking back now, what stays with me the most is the realization that gratitude and grief were both present in that moment, and neither one diminished the other. I wasn't grateful instead of grieving. I was grateful, and I was grieving. I was grateful for one more afternoon with him, one more conversation, one more opportunity to tell him about the granddaughter he would never meet. At the same time, I was grieving losses that had not fully arrived yet. I was grieving the progression of dementia and the possibility that my daughter would never know him. That is one of the realities of grief we do not talk about often enough. Grief does not begin at death. Sometimes our grief begins with a diagnosis. Sometimes it begins with a move into a memory care facility, or even just the recognition that we need to consider a move to memory care. And sometimes it begins when you realize that a future relationship you imagined may never come to be. Perhaps that's why gratitude and grief seem so incompatible to us. We tend to think that gratitude means happiness and grief means sadness. But anyone who has lived through loss knows that grief contains far more than sadness alone. Grief can include love, relief, anger, longing, tenderness, joy, hope, sometimes all in the same afternoon. What if gratitude is not happiness? What if grief is not only sadness? What if both are different expressions of love? These questions matter because gratitude is often weaponized against grieving people, even when no harm is intended. And most of us have heard some version of it. Well, at least you had so many years together. Hey, focus on the good memories. Be grateful for the time you had. When most people are offering these words, it's because they want to help, but the message underneath can sound like this: move toward gratitude and away from grief. But grief does not need to be corrected. When we use gratitude to escape sorrow, we're no longer practicing gratitude, we're avoiding reality. So how can we engage gratitude without bypassing sorrow? As both a grief educator and a somatic practitioner, I have found that the answer is not in changing our thoughts. It is found in changing our relationship to our experience. And when I think about that afternoon with my grandfather, I realize I was never grateful for memory loss. I was never grateful that his life was ending. I was grateful that I was able to witness the moment. I was able to sit beside him, hear his laugh, watch his eyes light up when he learned he would become a great-grandfather. Gratitude does not require us to appreciate our suffering. Sometimes gratitude simply invites us to notice what is present alongside suffering. On days when hope feels far away, I do not ask myself to feel grateful. I have found that gratitude forced into the room too early often feels more like pressure than comfort. So instead, I begin with noticing. I notice what hurts, the ache in my chest. I notice the tension in my shoulders or the longing that keeps circling back around. For me, I notice pressure in my upper spine, feeling like I need to move and crack my back and stretch, and nothing quite feels like relief. I notice the grief without asking it to be smaller, quieter, or easier to carry. But then when I'm ready, I gently widen my awareness. I notice the chair supporting my body. I notice the warmth of a cup of tea nearby. I can notice if I have a message from a friend, if the sunlight is coming through the window in a particularly beautiful way. Yesterday, I noticed a ladybug crawling along my window. I noticed a dog asleep at the door. Sometimes even just the steady rhythm of my own breath. I am not looking. I am not looking. I'm saying it so many times for you to hear me. I'm not looking and searching for silver linings. I am not trying to convince myself everything is okay. I am simply allowing myself to notice that alongside the pain I feel, other things are also present. And this is the restorative practice I return to again and again. Not gratitude as a demand, not gratitude as a way out of grief, gratitude as witnessing, as paying attention, gratitude as the willingness to acknowledge what is supporting me, even as I continue to exist within what hurts. And over time, I have come to believe that this is one of the ways our hope returns. Hope often returns first as awareness, as a quiet recognition that even in the midst of loss, support is present, life is unfolding, and we are not only held by what hurts, but also by what sustains us. We do not have to choose between honoring what is absent and noticing what remains. We are capable of both. Years later now, when I look at the photograph of me and my grandfather, I still wish my daughter had known him. And yet, in many ways, she does. She has spent her entire life being loved by someone who learned how to love from him. So often, the patience I offer her, the kindness, the gentleness I try to practice, the curiosity he taught me, and the values I carry into being a mother didn't begin with me. They were shaped by all the people who came before me, including a grandfather whose influence remains woven throughout my life. Loss interrupts a relationship, but it does not erase the relationship itself, nor does it erase its impact. The grief remains, the gratitude remains, and the lessons and the interwovenness remains, and I no longer believe they are all competing with one another. Because we grieve what we love, and because we love, we are capable of gratitude. Sometimes grief itself teaches us how precious life has been all along, and on the days when hope feels far away, perhaps that is enough. It's not happiness or resolution, but the willingness to notice what still remains while honoring what is now gone. And that too is a restorative practice. Thank you for listening to episode 252 of Restorative Grief. If this idea landed somewhere tender for you, I want you to know you are not alone in the complexity of it. So many of us were taught that we have to choose between gratitude and grief, when in reality, most of life asks us to hold both at once, often in the same breath. So if you take anything with you today, let it be this. Slow down enough to notice what is here. Let yourself feel what is true. And remember that nothing about your grief needs to be fixed in order to be witnessed. If this is your first time listening to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart, I'm really glad you found your way here. Thank you to the patrons of the show who support this work and help keep these conversations alive and accessible. You can find details in the show notes if you'd like to become a patron for as little as $2 a month. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review if this episode resonates with you, as it genuinely helps more people find this kind of support. And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.